This episode is brought to you by Battlefield 6. Battlefield 6 is the ultimate all-out warfare experience. Rip through the skies in aerial dogfights. Demolish your surroundings for a strategic advantage. Harness complete control over every action and movement using the kinesthetic combat system. Drop into multiplayer with your squad, or fight furiously as a member of the Dagger 1-3 squad in a gritty, adrenaline-fueled single-player campaign where you'll defend a world on the edge of collapse.
It's the Smucker's Uncrustables podcast with your host, Uncrustables. Okay, today's guest is rough around the edges. Please welcome Crust.
Thanks for having me.
Today's topic, he's round with soft pillowy bread.
Hey.
Filled with delicious PB&J.
Are you talking about yourself?
And you can take him anywhere.
Why'd you invite?
And we are out of time.
Are you really cutting me off?
Uncrustables are the best part of the sandwich. Sorry, Crust.
On today's episode of the Retro Gamers podcast, writer-director Richard Moss joins me to discuss the making of his horror video game documentary series, Terrorbytes. Hello everyone and welcome to the Retro Gamers podcast, episode 421. Anthony here, and it is October. This is probably my favorite time of year because for those of you who have not listened or watched any episodes in this month, I am a huge horror game fan. I love horror movies, always been a part of my being since I was a little kid. And during October, I always try and do something really cool and really fun to celebrate Halloween. And I think we have a really great episode for you today. I did an interview with Richard Moss, writer and director of the documentary Terrorbytes, which is a horror documentary that focuses solely on horror games. And it's a 5-episode series. I stumbled across it on the internet. I absolutely fell in love with it. So I was really happy when I reached out to Richard and he got back to me and said he would be willing to do an interview for the show. So without further ado, here's my interview with Richard Moss, writer and director of the horror game documentary Terrorbytes. All right, welcome back to the Retro Gamers podcast, and I'm really excited to be joined here by Richard Moss, writer and director of the docuseries Terrorbytes. Richard, thank you so much for joining me today. How you doing?
Hi, I'm doing well. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's been a little bit since I got to talk about this, so that's gonna be fun.
All right. Well, you know what? I'm glad there was a little bit of a buffer, so maybe there's a little more excitement if you were talking about it for a while, right? You get that little bit of a break.
You know, because when we first launched it, you know, I had to do this whole flurry of like lots of promotion, and now there's been a bit of room, so it's like, okay, cool, I get to talk about Terrorbytes again. It's awesome.
Well, I'm really excited that you're excited to talk about it because I was over the moon when I found this, and I thought that not only was this perfect to talk about on my podcast, but just to talk horror gaming for a little bit because I'm a huge horror fan, have been since I was a little kid. So this is a treat for me just as much as it is for you. So. But before we get into talking about Terrorbytes, I wanted to hear a little bit more just about you. I know you wrote and directed this, but just a little bit about your background.
Okay, so yeah, I got into writing about games kind of by accident about 15 years ago. And I wanted to get into like game design and maybe some writing for games. And as part of doing that, I was like, okay, I want to analyze games more deeply. I want to think about them more deeply and understand what I like. So I started keeping some diaries, and then I started publishing some of those diaries online, and that got a good response. And I've got this sort of pet interest in Mac gaming because I used a lot of Macs when I was young, and I know there are games on the Mac. So I wrote an article about that, and that went really well. And so I'm like, okay, this writing thing's pretty fun. I seem to be good at it. Lots of people liking my work. Teachers at school always thought, you'll be a writer one day, Richard. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll I'll do more writing. And I sort of stumbled my way into writing professionally from there, doing lots of freelance stuff at like Ars Technica and Polygon and all these other games and tech publications, occasionally doing some science writing too. And after I'd done that for a while, I went back to those roots and I wrote a book called The Secret History of Mac Gaming. It's right above my head, actually, on my shelf. And then written a couple more books since then. I wrote Shareware Heroes about the 90s indie gaming scene on PC and Mac, and A Tale of Two Halves, the history of football video games. I always get mixed up the order of the subtitle, but it's about soccer games. This 600-page monstrosity all about soccer games.
600 pages, wow. Holy cow.
We went deep.
Literally, I was just going to say, I don't know if you can go deeper than that. 600 pages. Holy.
I played over 400 games for doing that book.
Wow.
Found out that the genre is a lot bigger than I thought it was. Going in, we thought, oh, there must only be a few hundred soccer games that have ever been made, right? There's over 1,000.
That's impressive that you literally just took on hundreds of them. I can only imagine.
Yeah. And I loved it because I'm a big fan of the sport and of soccer games. And meanwhile, I was working on that and another book that's coming up really soon. In a couple of months, you'll find out more about it. But it's about Age of Empires. I can at least tell you that.
Nice.
I started doing documentaries. I started working with this company, Creator VC, that had a pretty big success with this huge talking head style documentary called In Search of Darkness. It's all about 1980s horror films. So it's like 4+ hours. And they've done 5 of them, I think, at this point.
I've actually heard of it. I may have seen some of it, actually.
Yeah, so they did 3 on the 1980s, and then now they're doing the 90s. So they've done the first half of the 90s, and then the second half is happening right now, or just happened. I work at the company and I forget what's going on at the other teams, but so they're doing that, and the CEO, the guy who founded the company, is like, I want to do something on games, and he started working with this really talented editor who he was going to work with on that, and they picked first-person shooters. And they picked this just because the CEO is like, I love Halo. I played Halo when I was in college. Of course. I want to make a thing about first-person shooters. There was no science to it. It's just, this genre is still popular, and I like Halo, so let's do it. And I had written an article about first-person shooters on Ars Technica, like 7,000 words, 8,000 words, probably. Really, really big article. And he loved that article. So he sent me an email saying, hey, would you like to work on this? Would you like to write it? And I don't know who you are, but let's have a chat. And actually what he did was he told me that they're working on this thing, and he wanted a meeting, and he didn't tell me what the meeting was about. So I got on the call not knowing, and after 15 minutes he pitched me on writing it. So it was weird.
and at that point, what was your knowledge of first person shooters? Like, did you play a lot of them, or was this like you were going to have to really do your legwork?
I played a lot of them in the old days. I liked 90s shooters and the few handful of things that came out in the 80s. I liked those games, the old school shooters, and I had pretty good knowledge of that stuff, and I knew almost nothing about the past 20 years of what's happening outside of Portal. I really liked Portal. So
you and a lot of people.
So I was aware of what else has been happening, but I barely played anything. So I was having a bit of imposter syndrome about it, but I put together a huge synopsis, I guess you might call it, just like an outline of everything. If we were making the perfect, complete first-person shooter documentary, this is what it would be. And there's like a few games per year, because their format for In Search of Darkness was we go year by year, but that's about 1 decade, and that's sort of manageable if you're willing to go to 3-4 hour long film. First-person shooters, it's like right from the beginning we're set up to fail because it's an entire life of a genre that goes back technically to 1973. So it's a 50-year history. And there's almost nothing from 73 until the late 80s, but still there's a 50-year history, and there's no way you could fit that in without going to like over 10 hours. So we had to, then once it got funded, we had to shrink it down. And I didn't have to do that on my own because I brought in my friend and colleague, David Craddock, who actually is a proper expert on first-person shooters to work
Smart.
with me.
Smart move.
And so we co-wrote it together, and we found out that from surveys that our backers, because we put it on Kickstarter, our backers, they love sort of what's now called the boomer shooter era. They love the golden age in the 90s.
Of course.
And so we focused on that. We put a heavy emphasis on games in the 90s, and then we sort of went a little bit into the 2000s and basically stopped completely after I'm trying to think. We went Half-Life 2, and then we went a couple more games from there.
I was going to say you had to go into
remember.
you had to go into the 2000s to get Halo in there. Otherwise, your CEO would have been like, "Wait a minute."
Yeah, and we ended up with a massive amount of really good material, and we just sort of had to figure out how do we make this something that works semi-coherently, and made even harder by the fact that so I was co-writer and producer technically, and David was co-writer director. And neither of us made a documentary before, at least not like this. I'd done like podcast documentaries that are like half an hour long, and it's 1 or 2 people that the story's about, not dozens of people. So we're doing something new, and we ended up with 3.5 hours of film made, and we're still in the 90s. And we had a meeting, and it's like we didn't realize we had that much. It's like, how long's the film at this point? And we urgently during the meeting are like tallying it up, and like, oh, oops, it's 3.5 hours. We're on track to make it 5.5 or 6 hours long. We have a hard limit of 4.5 hours that we've been given.
Wow,
that's not going to work. So we had to rip out a bunch of stuff. We cut a couple of segments that we'd actually finished. We made a lot of them shorter. It's like something that was 10 minutes that didn't need to be 10 minutes. Just rip out all the bits that aren't important. And so there are heaps of lessons from working on that about scoping and planning.
Well, I was going to say trial by fire. That is the definition of trial by fire, where you're thrown in and you figure it out, and lessons are learned, right?
Yeah, and we ended up with something that's pretty good. And David and I were very experienced storytellers, and we had some brilliant interviews, so we were able to put together what was a pretty good film and beautifully edited. Anyway, as we're finishing that, we're thinking, well, what can we do next? And we had a plan for what David would do next, which still hasn't happened. And I shouldn't talk about what it is.
Okay.
Hopefully it will happen one day. Yeah, hopefully it'll still happen one day, but we had to sort of set it aside for a bit. It's on the shelf. It's a maybe one day. And then I needed a new project. And just as it happened, we had this other guy, Daniel Richardson, who knew our CEO, Robin Block, and was trying to convince Robin that we could do a games version of In Search of Darkness. He's a massive horror guy, Dan.
Nice.
and Robin was like, "Really? Are there horror games?" And then
Oh, wow.
"Oh yeah." Robin's not a gamer. So Dan then put together this huge pitch, going into lots of ideas for how it could be approached, games to cover, people to talk to, and Robin brought me in, and I gave my thoughts, and we sort of went back and forth a bit, and ended up with a concept for a series, a 5-part series that had the same episodes that we've ended up with, and one of them got retitled, but the same topics. And Dan put a massive amount of work into what we call audience validation. So he was going around to horror sites and communities saying, "Would you like this thing to be made?" And trying to get support, trying to prove that there's an audience for this. And he definitely proved that there's an audience for it. To fast forward, it turns out that it's really difficult to sell that audience on a high-cost premium Blu-ray package, but there is a huge audience of people who love horror games for sure, and so it got into production. And
Nice.
And I got to work with Dan, who is just this treasure trove of knowledge. He knows everything about horror, it seems. Like anything that I ask him, because my knowledge is more spotty. I have good knowledge on some bits and not so good in others.
But he's the encyclopedia. He's the encyclopedia.
I can just ask him, what about this? I feel like there's something here, and he will spend 15 minutes telling me about it. And so we worked really well together, because I could be the person that pulls it all together and condenses it down into something that's coherent and accessible to people. And Dan is making sure that there's depth everywhere, and that we're not just doing a surface level reading of horror games. So that was great. And
that sounds great. It sounds like it sounds like you guys were like a really good duo working on this. And now, of course, we're talking about Terrorbytes. And before we dive into it a little bit more, I thought it would be great to show the trailer for the series. So let's go to the trailer, and then we'll come back and keep talking.
I think being scared makes you feel alive.
Horror games were like a bonding experience for me and my friends.
It makes you live this trauma.
Putting that through the horror lens, dialing it up to 11.
And of course, I always love the viscera.
I think I got killed.
Seeing decapitation, seeing heads exploding.
When I first saw it, I was like, oh my God.
I literally jumped up out of my seat and like slammed the pause button.
I think horror in video games kind of goes back to like the beginning of video games.
The explosion of the video game craze hit us in 1983.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty rough for back then.
Scariest game in the arcades. It was so good.
Will this popularity last is the question. Well, the makers of video games are gambling that it will.
The label survival horror came in '96.
Resident Evil, Biohazard. Oh, that's a scary game.
But then everyone tried to understand what was the precursor.
Now we were like, we really got to finish this thing. We were scared to death.
サイレントヒルっていう企画ができたときに、このタイトルであれば僕はゲーム音楽っていうのを変える。
The publisher had to pull out of the contract, and we were like, okay, what do we do? What do we do?
It was a deeply emotional thing to write at the time.
You know, it felt like something that was made by people that are hurting.
Because I'm going to get choked up about this.
This is so much more than I realized it was going to be.
We're into this era of digital storytelling
where we have the ability to inject some of that reactivity and that life back into things.
What if we break that rule? What happens if we do that?
Video games are causing violence, and I'm like, oh yeah? I'll show you.
They really twisted the nipples of horror games.
Okay, we're doing something good there.
Talk about identifying what scares gamers the most.
I'm just sitting by my friend going,
The emotional playing that you have is a first-person emotional response.
It causes me to feel that thrill or that fear or that light.
It's almost more frightening when you have hope.
これをできるだけ両方味わいたいというか。
Yeah, okay, there's a sweet spot there. Let's push on this one.
I love this. I want to see more of it.
Oh my god, I gotta get out, I gotta stay alive, I gotta get out, I gotta stay alive.
I mean, I think it's pretty simple.
We're gonna scare ourselves to death.
Might as well go big or go home. Just make it ridiculous.
All right, so you were talking about yourself and Dan. You guys were kind of the team that brought all of this together. So just to get an idea, how long did it take to put this together, start to finish?
So Dan was pitching us on it around about this time. What is it? 2 years? 2 years ago. When did FPS come out?
Estimates are fine. It's okay.
2 years ago, I think.
Okay.
Unless I'm skipping a whole year. Yeah, it came out 2023. So 2 years ago, Dan was pitching us about this time, and it took a month or so of ideation, and then went into validation, which was a couple of months, and then prepping for the sorry, it wasn't Kickstarter, the first pre-sale campaign is what we called it, but it's crowdfunding just on our own site. And so then we went into production, actually starting to make the thing, not just talking about making the thing and planning the thing, actually starting to make it in the middle of March last year. And we completely wrapped on post-production around April this year. It took just over a year to actually make the thing.
I was going to say, that is an ambitious schedule. That is a crazy schedule with the amount that you guys cover in these 5 episodes. To do all of that start to finish in a year, that I have to say, because when I saw this I was like, this had to take a long time to put together. There's so much content in here, so many interviews. You guys really didn't. I feel like you didn't leave anything on the table. Just looking at, just watching what you covered, because you guys go all the way back to the 80s. I think I don't know if you go, you go all because I saw you go back to the Atari 2600, which didn't have a lot of horror games on it, but you still went all the way back there, and then you go straight through to today. Alien Isolation, Dead by Daylight, which, by the way, Dead by Daylight's one of my favorite games to play. So I was very excited when I saw that you got the co-creators on there. That was really fun. But the breadth of it to me was so impressive. And then were there challenges trying to get the the creators, the composers, because you have a slew of people in here. So how did it what was the process like, just trying to get all of those people?
Yeah, that's a good one. So we ended up with 51 people interviewed, and there were 2 or 3 that were sort of last minute that we pulled in to plug gaps. One of them, the doctorate researcher in horror games. She is actually a friend of Dan's, and we happen to know that she's extremely knowledgeable about the genre and could come in and plug gaps for us. She presents well on camera. So when we are we'd almost finished editing, actually. We'd pretty much wrapped on 3 episodes. We had some stuff that we needed to fix in the first 2 episodes, like make better connections between games or between ideas, and then a couple of other gaps coming up in the last 2 episodes. So we put together a last-minute interview with her where we didn't exactly tell her what to say all the time, but we're like, we want you to talk about this, and specifically you're making a connection for us between A and B, which you don't normally do that with interviews, but she was such a champion. She was great. All the different people that we thought would be interesting to talk to, based on these 5 episode topics that we had, which quickly are, so you've got survival horror, licensed games, FMV games, and interactive movie type things like Until Dawn, the modern indie scene, and then the last one is what we called cursed and controversial. So it's stuff that like was the target of attempts to ban games or censorship, or just talking about taboo, that kind of thing. So we had these top level ideas of what's going in each episode, and we'd had a lot of discussion about what we might cover within each of these topics. And so we're thinking about, well, for each episode, who do we need to be able to do that? If we want to cover a game, ideally we're going to have someone who worked on it, who we can talk to. And so let's pick 1 or 2 people that we can have on our wish list for each game, and then we'll go out and we'll try and contact them. And so that gives us a list of dozens of people. I don't know, 60, 70, 80 people. And we have a prioritization. It's like these are our top targets, and slowly we put together this whole package. And along the way, we might have already started working on things, and then we're, oh, hang on, this person would be great to talk about this. And if we had the budget left and the room in our schedule, then we would try and get them. And we ended up with a fantastic list. There's not much can complain about, other than just the fact that we weren't able to get a couple of the biggest names.
Yeah, but you got a lot of heavy hitters in there. Of the people that you did wind up interviewing, was there a particular favorite you had? And not that I want you to like point to one person, but was there somebody who like kind of made an impact when you talked to them? Or
So like for Dan, scoring Akira Yamaoka, the composer of the Silent Hill series, that was huge, because he's a hero. So that's amazing coup, and like for both of us, getting Swery was a huge deal, because he's so interesting and cool guy. But for me, the most exciting one was getting Ken and Roberta Williams, because I love adventure games, and they're sort of on the bucket list of people to interview one day. A couple of favorites, Graham Devine, who was co-creator of The Seventh Guest.
I was so
gave
excited.
A beautiful interview.
Yep, I was so excited when I saw him in the documentary, because Seventh Guest is one of my favorite games of all time.
And he went to that place talking to it for us. I know him. I've talked to him before, and maybe that helped. But he was really willing to go deep on it and get emotional, and so here's a very beautiful interview, I thought.
That's cool. Let's get into a little bit of each episode, just to, again, I don't want to dive,
Finish training for the day? Time to fight post-workout fatigue with Core Power Protein Shakes. They're packed with 26 grams of high-quality protein to build muscle and electrolytes to help hydrate. The nutrition you need to help your body replenish, rebuild, and repair post-workout, so you can power on to the next one. Champion your recovery with Core Power. Visit corepower.com to learn more.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve, so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
We ever give away the farm here. And the first episode, which I know is available on YouTube for, as people can watch the first episode for free, to give an idea on what the rest of it is going to be like. But talk to me about that first one, like the whole entry into enter the survival horror.
That was a really tough one because you could make an entire 4, 5, 6 hour documentary just about survival horror games, right?
Yes.
And so we knew that it was going to be challenging right from the start, and it was going to be really important because when people think horror games, a lot of them actually just think about survival horror, and they don't even realize that there's other kinds of horror games. So I was like, I need to push this down the road. So we did post-production out of order. We made episode 3 first, then we made episode 2, and then 1, so that I could have extra time to think about it and to figure out what the style and the voice is of this series. And all the while, I'm constantly thinking about how is this actually going to come together? We have a vague idea of it. We have sort of a bullet point list of these are the games we want to cover. But then how does that fit together? I want every episode to tell a story about its topic. And I want this survival horror episode to not feel too like flighty, too airy. It's got to have some meat to it. People who are fans of Silent Hill and Resident Evil, they know their stuff. They are experts.
Yes, they are.
But we don't have room. Like, even when we got the all clear to make it longer, to make it a feature length opening episode instead of an hour, which is what we're supposed to be targeting for every episode. It still is not enough space to do a reasonable job going into the depths of those series. So we had to pick just a few games from each of those series to cover along the way, and to not try and be all encompassing. You can't do that. You got to focus. You got to have something that you focus on, and that really that comes largely out of the interviews. And so Silent Hill 2, because we were able to get Jeremy Barstein, I forget, who worked on the translation and worked very closely with the writer of Silent Hill 2. We knew we had to focus on the story there and on the plot theming, and this thing with James and the underlying narrative there and what's going on, and as it turns out what it means to Jeremy and how the game. I'm trying not to give anything away, people who haven't seen it, how his life events have changed his perspective on understanding this character and this character's relationship to his dead wife. Because for anyone who doesn't know Silent Hill 2, that's basically the plot of the game, is James gets a letter from his dead wife, and she says she's waiting for him in this town that they used to go to, and so he goes to Silent Hill, and oops, there's fog everywhere and there's monsters, and it's a dark and weird game.
And an amazing game at that. But you touch you touch on so many good elements, like in that first episode, whether it's like, the psychology behind them, the music, obviously the music plays a huge thing, and not just obviously with other games. Clock Tower you included, which I was very happy with because I loved the Clock Tower series. Obviously Resident Evil's in there, but you really did cover a lot.
And another to get an idea of like how I approach the storytelling, it's so stalker enemies are huge in survival horror, right?
Oh yeah.
But I thought, well, stalker enemies, they've kind of always been there. So instead of just at a single point, we're gonna talk about stalker enemies now, or we're just gonna talk about Resident Evil 3 or something, and like, oh, it made stalker enemies. Well, no, that's not where they came from. You had stalker enemies going all the way back, and I had the idea early on. Well, Sinistar is basically like a survival horror game.
Yes, I remember you
slightly
talking
controversial.
about that. Yep,
it's slightly controversial idea, but I was because I was doing deep dive into what horror games are and trying to understand them better. And it occurred to me, well, this game is basically a horror game, and there's a stalker enemy right there. That booming voice screaming at you as it chases after you, and you cannot kill the Sinister. It is the quintessential stalker enemy, and so we sort of right at the beginning of the episode we're setting this idea that there is a through line, if only you look for it, of how the genre has evolved, and so you have a stalker enemy there, and then the idea keeps popping up in other kinds of games, and along the way you get a role playing game with Sweet Home, and you get 3D Monster Maze, and so there's all these weird different things, and Clock Tower is like the side scrolling thing, and then you got Alone in the Dark.
Alone in the Dark. Like I was just going to say, yeah.
It's like Resident Evil, but more primitive. It's like not as sophisticated. And you get to Resident Evil, and it's actually it's building on all these things that came before it. They actually did pull from that. Like it's explicitly influenced by Sweet Home, but you can tell that they've pulled ideas from Alone in the Dark. They have the dogs, and it's like it's the same as in Alone in the Dark. A dog comes through the window. The same thing happens early in Resident Evil. They obviously played that game. And so you can see the genre is evolving, and that's what the episode became about. It's like, here is the roots of survival horror and how the genre evolved, and leading up to basically the point where a lot of people argue that it died, like survival horror stopped when Resident Evil 4 came out, and it did something different. And so then we sort of got a 10-minute or so extended epilogue of like, here's a little bit of what was happening that was survival horror related after that, and here's a really compelling argument about how the genre might have evolved from there in an unexpected direction.
Yeah. Now, switching into the next episode where you talk about licensed games. Now, licensed games to me, before watching this, they're always like hit or miss, you know, and in a lot of cases, you know, they seem to miss, and or at least I always feel like they miss more than they hit. But when they hit hard, and they hit really well. So so it was cool to see just an episode focused specifically on licensed games because they're challenging in their own right.
Our earliest idea for that episode was going to spend a lot more time talking about the bad games. Because you know, when you think of licensed games, at least if you're of a certain age, when you think of licensed games, you think of shovelware. You think of just horrible games that are put out for a quick buck, and the poor developers have been given some really quick turnaround time, and it's impossible for them to make a good game. But as we were working on it, it became apparent that there's so much good stuff that we can talk about that it would be a waste to spend any significant amount of time talking about the bad games. So we really only talked about bad games briefly as part of a whirlwind tour through the 8-bit era at the beginning, where we're setting the scene for the idea of adapting a game from that's come from a movie or a book or something. So then what the episode really became about was how do you adapt something from another medium into games and do it well? How does that actually work? And how have other forms of media influenced games, because it's not just licensed things. You also have lots of games that are pulling very liberally from Gothic fiction. Like Gothic fiction in horror is huge.
Oh yeah.
Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. They're in everything. They are all over the place. And Lovecraft. People love Lovecraft.
Yes, they do.
It keeps popping up everywhere, and so we're looking at that. At how do these particularly literary broad influences make their way in? How do games get explicitly adapted, and then also throwing in like Deadly Premonition, which is like Twin Peaks the game, but it's not licensed, so we're going to make it a little bit different. And it was a fun episode to work on. It was really hard to sort of find the narrative through line. That was one that we sort of tested with our audience as a way to like give them a preview, but also give us some feedback. We haven't finished making the series. What do you think of this? Turns out they loved it. We got like an average 9 out of 10, but we got some really useful feedback to help us figure out what was wrong with it, because it wasn't there. It wasn't where we wanted it to be yet. This is what happens with storytelling. Sometimes you get so close to it, and you can't see that people don't have the context that they need to understand the story that you're giving them. So the challenge with that episode was just how do we connect these little silos together, because this is not, licensed games did not sort of evolve in a meaningful way like survival horror did. They're all different, and they move across different genres. The Thing is like an action horror thing. There's a survival horror elements, but it's doing that. But then I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is an adventure game. It's a completely different genre.
Yes. Well, and that's and that's the thing. It's like that. I was going to say that licensed games are going to be, you can go anywhere with them because of the license that you're getting. So there's definitely a challenge there because you don't have that one definitive genre for the game. But you like you said, like doing that with a test audience gets you the information you need to try and figure out like how to put what pieces you need to get that connective tissue, and that and it worked.
And we got to cover some cool stuff. Like I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. That was so great getting to cover that. That's one of my favorite horror games. It is gut wrenching to play. The darkness within that story. Anyone who has read the short story from Harlan Ellison, it is brutal. It's maybe one of the darkest stories ever written.
I have not read that.
Of their existence.
Yes. I have not read that in a very long time. It's been at least 20 years since I've touched that one.
And in the same way, it's like Alien Isolation. It's like, how do we finally make an Alien game that captures what people felt when they watched the movie?
Did that game capture
xenomorphs that you can kill? Yeah.
That game captured it in spades. That is a frightening game. It really is.
Of course, Dead by Daylight. How do we pull in all these different IPs into one single universe? It's cool. We got to talk about lots of different interesting things, and it was just hard to figure out how to make them connect. That was all.
Yeah. Well, and then to just turn it on its head, going from something where you had a variety of different like game styles to now the next episode, which was about narrative nightmares. And this one I was really excited about because this is the one that covered like Seventh Guest and games like Until Dawn, which I love these types of games. I had a Sega CD when I was younger, and full motion video was all that system was about. So like I touched a whole bunch of these types of games.
Oh, I loved working on this one. Like you, I'm a huge fan of these games. I think they get a bad rap.
They do.
Yeah, they're weird. they deserve to be mocked, sure, but they should also be celebrated at the same time, because beneath that campiness and the really clunky controls, there's a lot of heart. These people making these games really cared, and they thought they were making the future. They thought everything is going to be like this one day. And in working on the episode, I sort of realized, well, they were kind of right, because if you look at games like Until Dawn, that is a modern version of what something like Night Trap or Phantasmagoria was doing.
Absolutely.
That it's just, you're not seeing the live action actors. They've used motion capture, so you're seeing animated version of the original actor. You're seeing Rami Malek in video game form instead of actual Rami Malek on the screen. But it's basically an FMV game like the old days. But the moment has arrived finally, and so we got to have this sort of rise and fall of FMV games, and then oh wait, they came back again.
Yep.
Because now you've got Until Dawn. Now you've got things like Her Story and Immortality from Sam Barlow, which are fascinating games.
Yep.
Really, really interesting.
The Dark Pictures anthologies, the Quarry. This thing's come back with a vengeance, and not only that, but like with the with the technological advances you have today. They're very, very compelling. It's not like it used to be where it's like Night Trap, I still have my original copy. Seventh Guest, I still have my original copy. And I don't, and for all the cheesiness, that were going on in those, there's just an inherent fun of watching them unfold while you're playing through it. It's, and you had to kind of be there kind of when these were coming out. That's the other thing too, to see what a leap it was to go from like these 8-bit games that had very colorful graphics and everything like that, to now saying, whoa, it's like I have actors on the screen and I'm watching this play out.
There's real people. That's like, whoa, there's real people on my screen, and that was huge. And the games ended up being really campy and cheesy and just totally clunky because the technology wasn't there yet. They had the technology now at that point to put real people on the screen. They didn't have the technology to do it in a fluid or fluent way. And even just putting them on the screen was taking a lot of innovation. Like the Seventh Guest, talking to Graham, it was fascinating hearing him describing how he built the technology, because he was the programmer. And I wasn't able to have all of this into the episode. This is something that I did have to leave on the table, some of the detail. But I was hearing about how he's adapting this camera footage to work in the game, and there are some bits that we did get in, like how they had a blue screen or blue or green screen, whatever color the screen was, but it wasn't. It was a blue screen, but it's not actually entirely blue. It was sort of purplish. They bought it from Home Depot, and he thought, that's not a problem. That's not a problem at all. Like, I'll just chroma key it out, and then oops. You hear this in the episode when people watch it, but turns out that you can't just chroma key out a purplish blue because there's red in purple. And so then when your actors have some red in their clothes, then you're getting rid of the red in their clothes as well. And so then he had to figure out, well, how do I solve this technical problem? And he just had technical problem one after another in making that game. And so it's just really hard to make these things, but they cared so much and they believed so much that this is where games were going, that I think their stories are really endearing. And meanwhile, there is depth to what they put in the games. And Phantasmagoria has a really dark story to it. This relationship that, in essence, a husband and wife move into a new house that they bought, and the guy's a photographer and she's a writer. And over the course of the game, he transforms into something different. He kind of becomes a monster, and so it is dealing with this very relatable and human experience of the person that I trust most in the world is not who I thought he was, and and it goes really dark. There's depth there, and the seventh guest as well, as campy and ridiculous as it was, their original idea for it had a lot more darkness to it, and there was a tension between the two creators, one of whom wanted to go like full horror, and the other one, Graham, was like more Scooby-Doo kind of horror, more accessible kids horror, and they landed somewhere in the middle where there's a bit of darkness there, but there's also a lot of light and fun.
Yeah, and it worked. And it worked.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it worked.
And Night Trap as well. And I should note
Night
Trap,
of course.
as much as we laugh about Night Trap and how funny it is, there's actually an artistry to how they made that. There's an immense skill, because you've got what's basically a movie that's running the whole game. Like everyone is moving around this house, and they're seamlessly going from one room to another. For them to have figured out how to do that, so that as you are changing cameras to look at different rooms in the house, everyone is appearing at just the right time. So like you see them leave the kitchen, and then if at that moment you click to the living room, you actually see them go from the kitchen to the living room seamlessly. Like it's all real. They did an incredible job, because the way they shot that was actually one room at a time. So they would build the set for one room. They'd do all the scenes in that room. Then they'd pull down the set and they'd do another room. So I am in awe of their skill.
That's amazing.
In making that.
Well, and it's funny, to your point, and when you look back at that and people laugh at that kind of game and everything like that. Every time I think about Night Trap, and this will lead into the next episode you talk about in the Indie Revolution, I always think of Five Nights at Freddy's, because Five Nights at Freddy's has the game mechanic that they showed off in Night Trap. They just did it, obviously they did it a little bit differently. But, and that leads into episode 4, where you talk about indie horror.
What an incredible thing the indie scene is.
It definitely is. It's amazing. It's amazing how many games get made on the indie scene, and how many great games on top of that.
Yeah, I think this is where horror really is now. It's like the indie episode is about how we got to where we are now. It's also about just what you can do with unbridled creativity, and the beauty of what you can create when you're making something for yourself. We're looking at the modern indie scene, but instead of looking at like right now, here's this massive ecosystem of indie games right now, it's how did we get to where we are right now? And so that means going back to the Flash game scene. And that means going back to things like Amnesia, The Dark Descent, and the original Outlast. And then picking, it's really actually quite difficult to picking the heavy hitters and the most influential, most important games that have led from there to where we are now. And of course, Five Nights at Freddy's has got to be in there.
Of course.
Love it or hate it, it is a phenomenon. It's a huge game. So we'd spend a little bit of time talking about that. We weren't able to get the creator, so we sort of kept it really tight, and just talk about that big idea of that switching camera and how effective it is when you open the door and oops, there's one of those animatronic monsters right at the door, and it's gonna like eat you. It's a very effective game doing what is basically jump scare horror, which the youngsters are really into their jump scares. And so we asked a bunch of designers, well, how do you do a good jump scare? And so we got some really good insight in there in that episode. I thought that the artistry that actually goes into doing a good jump scare as opposed to a cheap jump scare. The better jump scares are the ones that have the build up, the tension, and games like Outlast do that very well. And so it's interesting to hear people talk about how to do it well and how to do it cheaply. It's also just really cool to hear stories behind all these different games. Like I love Lone Survivor. I thought it was a really interesting game, and Jasper Byrne, the creator, we interviewed him, and we got the quite heartwarming story of where the game is come from, which not to spoil too much, but it's rooted in personal tragedy as well as loneliness that he's experienced, and he put what he was going through into the game as sort of a form of therapy, and a lot of indie games do that, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, again, it's one of those things, like you said in the beginning of this, where it's like indie games are created like through just passion and love for something specific. You're not being hired to make it necessarily or anything like that. It's like this is something that's really personal to the creators. So when I find when these games come out, you can see that in the experience. And I think in your episode you touch on that when you're talking about when you're interviewing these people and getting their thoughts behind all of these things.
Probably my favorite segment in the whole series is in episode 4. So I think episode 3 is my favorite episode, but in episode 4 we've got this segment towards the end. I think I called it Desolation. And it is, or I might have called it just Desolate. Anyway, it's about the 4 different games. I think it's four games, and the different ways that they deal with this idea of hopelessness and desolation, and being othered, and what you can go through when you're facing this stuff. Like, so What Remains of Edith Finch, anyone who hasn't played the game, it's about a girl whose family is cursed. Like the whole family believes there's a family curse, and quite rightly, because everybody dies.
Yes.
All of her siblings, her parents, her grandparents, everyone is dead, and the game is about her revisiting the family house, and you experience each person's death, and it's gut-wrenching game.
I was about to say I played that game, and the only words I can come up with it was absolutely gut-wrenching. It hurt to want to go through that game. It really did. But again, it showed just how well done it was made, and I'll never forget my experience going through that game.
Likewise, and I had to play it twice for the film because
ouch,
the first time I captured the footage, something went wrong with the capture, and so it was low res, and I had to redo it so that I would get the full resolution,
of course,
to put in the dock. So then going and playing it again when I've just finished it was really painful.
Salt in the wound.
I suffered for the art, and I got through it.
Well, it was worth
it. That segment, it goes into that, and Swery's really interesting game, The Missing. The main title is The Missing, and it's about this girl who I don't want to give away the reveal, but the girl, it's dedicated to people who are different, and the girl kind of goes into this dream world, and in this dream world, she cannot die. So she kind of gets her limbs all blown off. She can just be this little blob that's got a finger left or something, and then you press a button and you regenerate. And nice. The game is about blowing yourself up again and again to regenerate, and that's sort of a metaphor for what we do as people. We kill ourselves to grow, to develop, to become better people. We're constantly killing ourselves again and again, metaphorically. So all these games are dealing with this sort of idea in a different way of helplessness and being othered. And I'm proud of the way that turned out, and so that's my favorite segment.
All right. Well, I'm glad I'm glad you were able to pinpoint your favorite segment in there. That's awesome. And then, of course, at the end, you have the last episode, which is Cursed and Controversial, which I always find entertaining hearing these types of stories, especially when you get around the controversy, because we lived through the 90s when games like these were getting attacked, not just by parents, by the government. People were coming out against games constantly.
We thought right from the start, you can't really talk about horror in games without talking about taboo. Just like horror in movies, same thing. You gotta talk about the taboo. It's right there. That's what horror does. Horror is about the things that you can't talk about. Horror is taboo at its core. So when you put taboo in video games, it's immediately controversial because a huge chunk of the population, especially people who are like older generations, think that video games are for kids. And so anything taboo should be off limits because games are only for like 10-year-olds. And it's not appropriate that a 10-year-old should be seeing this nudity or this violence. You can't put that in video games, but you can because games can be for adults too. And there's that tension, and so we looked at like Night Trap got completely overshadowed by its controversy. It got sucked in to the congressional hearings against video game violence. Even though it's so campy and ridiculous and silly, you've got these vampires. They're just dudes dressed in black who have this weird contraption that they put around someone's neck and they drag the person away. There's a violence to it, but it's silly. It's really silly, and anyone who actually played the game would not be able to take it seriously. The game is a satire of horror films. It's not a horror game itself, but it sort of ruins the life of its designer for a couple of years. He lost a girlfriend to it because she got sucked into it. She's like, I can't be associated with you because you made this disgusting thing, because that's what was all over the media. So his relationship exploded, and he was subject to lots of hatred, and no, in his case things worked out all right because he went away and he made dogs and cats, these like desktop pets things that if you're using computers in the 90s, you might remember that you could get like a puppy or a kitten on your computer that you would look after.
Oh yeah. I do remember
he made that.
Oh, that's awesome. Good
that was
recovery.
His next thing, and he did that intentionally because he's like, how can I go as far as possible away from this controversy?
I'm going to go to the cutest possible thing I can do.
Yeah, and he's like, well, what's cuter than a puppy dog?
Exactly.
And so that's what he did. There's no way you could possibly make this controversial, surely.
No.
And he was right. So we get to talk about that, and we get to talk about Doom, which is always getting attacked.
Of course.
And some people say that Doom's not a horror game, but Doom is a horror game. Doom was scary if you were playing it in 1993 for the first time. It was scary, and it was influenced by horror movies, so it deserves to be here. And so we got to talk about the controversies with these different games, with like half a dozen different games, but then talk about what makes the game interesting. Like, if it wasn't for the controversy, what makes this game interesting? In Night Trap's case, we already did that part in episode 3. We talked about what's interesting, but then we've got like Doom and Rule of Rose, which had a horrible controversy with that, real moral panic. So what if you take the game on its merits? What's interesting about it? What's good about it? And so we get to talk about the Doom level design. We get to talk about the Rule of Rose story and theming, and Manhunt. Like, what makes the design of that interesting, and did it go too far? There's sort of there's a question there. Did Manhunt go too far? And meanwhile, towards the end of the episode, we sort of pivot because we need to wrap up the series.
Of course.
But we also want to touch on fake games. This idea of a cursed game, which is really prevalent now. We've got creepypastas, and we've got urban legends like Polybius. And so we have a segment where we talk about this idea of a fake game, of a game that doesn't exist, but that might exist, and how that can be really interesting when people create a story about a game that isn't real, that is cursed in some way, and how then people have taken inspiration from that and made actual games that seem like they're cursed because they delete files on your desktop or something like that. And so we've got that, and then we wrap it up. We pull all the themes across all 5 episodes together.
So, that was a nice walkthrough of the whole series, which is great. And, for anybody listening and watching, if they're even having a slight interest in horror games, this would be a slam dunk for them. The fact that you covered so many games over the course of these 5 episodes is just absolutely phenomenal. You give a really good, well-rounded coverage of the horror genre, again, through these different themes. And I just, like I said, as a horror gamer, this series was just fantastic to dive into, and it was fun to devour, so to speak.
Great.
So and Richard, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, talking about this. I can tell just from having these discussions with you just how much you really enjoyed doing this and putting this together. And I'm going to put a bunch of links in the description and everything like that, but just tell people, where can they find and purchase Terrorbytes?
So at the moment, at the time we're recording, I believe the only place you can get it is from terrorbytesdoc.com. So I can spell that out, I guess. And my accent does make some people sometimes think of like a terabyte, like the unit of measure of storage. But no, it's terror as in terror, but then byte as in the computer byte. So TERRORBYTES, and then doc, just DOC.com, terrorbytesdoc.com. And you can buy a digital edition from there. We may one day do another print run of the Blu-ray. We either have or are currently in the process of setting up a waitlist. I'm not sure if it's up yet, but there'll be a waitlist that you can sign up to for that. Hopefully,
as soon as that waitlist is out, I'll be one of the first ones to throw my name on there. I do love physical copies. And then again, like we said earlier in the show, you can also see the first episode of Terrorbytes on YouTube if you want to get a taste of what the rest of the series is about. It's definitely worth your time. The entire series is absolutely worth your time. So, Richard, again, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. Thank you so much. And for everybody out there watching, go to terrorbytesdoc.com and get yourself a copy of Terrorbytes.